Welcome back to Lukewarm and Scarily Informed. I'm your host, Onyx, and today I'm here to answer the question, are transgender people real? And if so, what does that mean? In recent years, there has been lots of debate on whether being a trans person is a trend or a phase, and some people even believe it's not a real thing at all. Because of the seemingly endless misunderstanding and all of the hate that can come with it, I've decided to take a deep dive into the world of biology to find what makes trans people different from cisgendered people, and I am here to tell you all about it. Before I delve into my research, I would like to share some vocabulary with you to clarify the meaning of some words that are commonly misconstrued in the media. The first of which being sex. Sex is what a person is assigned at birth based off of their genitalia, but a common misconception is that sex and gender are the same, but gender is what a person presents as rather than what their genitalia might be. 99.9% of the time, people's sex matches their gender, and this is what we call cisgender people. But while that 0.1% of the population might seem very small, it actually encompasses around 78,370,000 people. These people will be called transgender people. Transgender is when someone identifies with a gender that doesn't match their sex. There's often confusion between gender and sex due to the fact that the terms from gender stem from sex. But while sex is based off of genitalia, gender is based off the brain structure and hormones and how it affects what a person presents as within society. In and of itself, sex is not an either-or thing. Many people believe that if you're a female, you have XX chromosomes, and if you're a male, you have XY chromosomes, and that's the end of it. This is very far from the truth, though, as many people, regardless of gender, can have a variety of chromosome sequences based off of chromosome swapping that can happen during the development of your DNA in the womb. But what may seem like X and Y nonsense is actually important because the distinction between whether you have female or male genitalia is caused by your chromosomes, or more specific, the Y gene or the SRY gene. This gene produces testosterone and triggers the formation of male genitalia. But in XX beings, because of the lack of the Y gene and testosterone, the female genitalia will continue to develop without interference. The determination of your sex takes only about 7 weeks into pregnancy to happen. Lots of people are against the idea that sex and gender are different, but a lot of people also don't know the biological inaccuracies in the belief that they are the same. To explore this, though, we will have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the womb. When a baby is developing, the genitalia develop first and the brain develops later. Because of this, it is possible for a brain structure to develop that doesn't match the pre-existing genitalia. While many also believe that male and female brains are the same, MRI scans show there are fundamental differences, such as left lobe, cerebrum, and hippocampus sizes, and density difference in right and left lobes. These differences is what makes it possible to identify when brain biology or gender might not match sex. Because people cannot change their brain chemistry, and we can plainly see the cause of being transgender in brain biology, that brings us to the conclusion that transgender can't simply be just a phase, because it's not a choice. I could preach to you all day about these things, sure, but why exactly does the brain do this? What makes the brain develop differently than the rest of the body? The answer to this question will lead us under the surface, right down to our DNA. Complications with DNA can cause transgenderism, and looking at this brings us back in time to when we first develop in the womb. Our DNA is the structure that essentially makes us, in a physical sense at least. Your DNA is the reason you may have blue eyes or blonde hair. And while DNA can't change structure, as it would cause physical mutation, it can change its shape. A common way DNA can change its shape is due to the life experiences and trauma. Chemical reactions in our brains happen depending on life situations we are in. Say, if you are confronted by a bear, your body may give you adrenaline to run. The same thing can happen in lower stakes or lesser traumatic situations, especially those that produce stress hormones. When too many stress hormones are supplied, the DNA can start to change shape and stop transmitting signals to prevent more stress hormones from being produced, and don't produce stress-preventing hormones, which can further affect the DNA. What does any of this have to do with transgenders, though? Just like with stress hormones, DNA's shape can be changed too much and can make it hard for other cells to read and correctly duplicate DNA in the forming of the fetus, increasing the chance of confusion when the body is forming in the womb based off of the affected cells. This confusion can very easily lead to a mismatch between the genitalia and the brain structure. During my research, a certain source has come to my attention as unreliable, but is often referenced as a qualified scientific research paper when trying to disprove the legitimacy of the trans community. This study is called Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria in Adolescents and Young Adults, a study of parental reports. This study from face value seems credible enough until you dig deeper. This is a study on trans children that not once consults a transgender teen themselves and focuses on the parents' perspectives. Furthermore, it has been speculated that all of the adult participants of this study have been found participating in transphobic organizations and were chosen via a survey, giving the authors the opportunity to hand select who they wanted to testify rather than gathering unbiased participants. Another inaccuracy of this study is the fact that they only evaluated the results of trans people who have regretted their choice to medically transition, compared to the overwhelming 90% that find the symptoms of depression and suicidal ideation lower significantly after medically transitioning. But I can't properly address this subject without also addressing a book called Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze that's seducing our daughters. This book was released by one Abigail Schreier in 2020, and it heavily references the above study. The stance the author takes up is the idea that transgender teens are not actually transgender, but simply depressed. What this stance does not take into account is the high rates of anxiety and depression in pre-transitioned trans people, no matter their sex. The fact that these trans children are depressed is merely a symptom of being trans rather than the cause of it. The study and book have worked hand in hand to spread misinformation among the public, with an astounding 60,000 plus copies sold. And while the concern that a child might be making the wrong decision in medically transitioning, and that it could possibly cause them harm, is a common one among most parents and the public, and is completely valid. But these fears can easily be soothed with easy, accessible, and accurate scientific statistics available to anyone with internet access through a myriad of sources, some of which I have assembled and provided for you below. There's a very common phrase stating that gender is a social construct. As we have determined that gender is actually rooted in brain biology, this is incorrect. But while gender may not be a social construct, gender roles are. Which brings us to the question, what does being trans mean to people in today's society? Well, because there's a large demographic of people who think being transgender is just a fad or a trend, transgender people and their identities are often not taken seriously, no matter how closely they follow the gender rules set out for them according to society. But this goes much further than just being looked down upon. Throughout time, it has been illegal and even punishable by death as to come out as trans. And while in recent days this has slowly been getting better, there are still many places where the government and its uninformed people are fighting against trans people's rights to things like healthcare and gender-affirming surgery, which are proven to lower the 40% suicide rate found within the transgender community. Even in places where access to these surgeries are possible, they are made inaccessible to most trans people through the various steps, financial difficulties, and complications that can occur. All of that standing, there is something to be said for the overwhelmingly positive communities that can be found in online spaces that can hold hope and support for trans people no matter their situation. Well, provided they have access to the internet, that is. But don't just take my word for it. Listen to these clips from an interview with another trans teen who is all too familiar with these struggles. How did your family react to you coming out?
The age-old question. All right, well, at first they were a little shocked because they didn't know at first, but over progression of time, my family has learned to kind of accept it. They're still new to it because I did come out like a few months ago, technically a year ago, but they're gonna get used to it.
How did their reaction make you feel? I feel like a therapist right now, but how did it make you feel?
Okay, so at first I was kind of scared because at first my original thought is that I was either going to get disowned or I was going to get kicked out. And I also thought that they weren't going to accept me. So that was my first thought. But we were taking therapy, family therapy, and we're talking more about it. And they're asking me questions, so it has become a progress.
Yeah. That's good. Have you always known you were trans?
Yeah. My only thing is that I have realized this because of who I have watched in the past and also how I have felt, because I kind of had blocked out memories from when I was a child. And because of this, I kind of came to the realization I've always known. And I also found out that the thoughts I have thought about as a child has also happened with my other trans friends. And we've all had the same type of thoughts as children. And I found out, it's a reoccurrence of a domino effect with trans people.
Could you
this reoccurring effect because I'm friends with mostly trans guys, but me and him were speaking about this, and we were talking, and he asked me this question a year ago. Hey, have you ever thought about getting breast cancer just to have a flat chest? And I looked at him and I'm like, no fucking way, because I thought about that as a child, and this was before I kind of realized that I was trans. And I'm like, oh my god, this makes so much sense. And I was also I knew trans people existed as a child too, by the way, but I didn't know. For me, I kind of also felt upset at one point because I realized I kind of knew I was, but I didn't know when I was going to come out. And I also kind of lost a bit of memory in the 7th grade because that's also when I came out to friends a little bit. So, and then my memory kind of was erased for a little bit because I kind of had a forgetful memory somehow. I don't know. It's just how my mind works.
We love trauma blocking.
Yeah, it was really weird because I really forgot about it until years later, and I'm like, oh my god, wait, why did I forget about this?
Would you say your place in society has changed since coming out?
It has, because a lot of people still view me, like, let me say this, a lot of people still view me as a girl, even though I'm not. And it has also made people think about the stereotypes that comes with trans men and trans people. Because with trans men, they always assume that they're very skinny and are able to transition at a young age. And or they have accessibility to binders or masculine clothing, when some of them don't even choose to have masculine clothing and still like to be feminine, even though they identify themselves as guys, and that's okay. But with not a lot of people really know about it because how chubby I am. And it also has, because of the stereotype, and I still have a fear of going to the guy's bathroom, because even though a lot of people in my grade are accepting, I do know that if they ever get the chance, they would jump me. And I do envy those that do pass really well.
What is a time that being transgender has given you a disadvantage?
I went on my nightly road trips with my friend and his ex-girlfriend at the time with my brother. And we stopped in this gas station that was near my mom's town. And I went to the guy's room, because I had pee. I had to, because I couldn't hold my bladder. So when I went, there was this guy in there. I don't even know what he was on at first, because he was just like, doing his own business. And he clearly did not mind his business, and he tried going up all in my face. At least tried to, and then kind of freaked out and walked out of the bathroom. And I'm just like, and I told him, like, dude, it's fine. I'm doing my own business. You're good. He's like, oh, okay. And he walks out of the bathroom, and I heard him, and he's like, I thought that guy was a girl and everything. And I'm like, that was great. But it was also a disadvantage because it made me uncomfortable, and that was my first uncomfortable encounter with a cis guy in the bathroom.
Have you ever doubted your worth based off of your place in society?
I have, because I have thought of, what if I'm not really trans and I'm just faking it type of situation. That spider's having a fun time.
Yes. Anyways.
Or, like, what if I'm just not, what if just people don't see me as a guy and they're just respecting my pronouns or my identity because they don't want me to have, like, a hissy fit? Which I'm pretty sure, because honestly, I wouldn't put it past people like that. Because there are people like that in society, even friends too, because I have like a hell-bent idea that some of my friends really don't care about my identity.
And I just want to validate you here, because I have never known a trans person who hasn't kind of like moderately brainwashed themselves. What if I'm not trans and I'm just pretending and I can't tell? So yeah, it's definitely not just you there.
I'm glad, because I do know people that have said the same thing, and I'm like, I'm glad to know that, because I've really kind of been scared to.
Yeah, that's also a trauma response, but we won't get into that right now. Do you think that change in societal standing, let's just call it, has changed your quality of life?
Yes, because I have found out a lot more of how some cis people view transgender people. And it has made me very slightly disappointed, because they have this idea of what, not just trans guys, but trans women too, of what they look like. And I am very deeply disappointed in people, like cisgender people, that are like that if they don't educate themselves.
What is a time that you can remember being discriminated against?
Let me think of a time. Actually, I can, because I know this. Yep, I'm gonna have to go with this story. I was discriminated against about this guy that a lot of people know, who is transphobic, yes, but yet knows a lot of trans people. And what's upsetting is that he has to ask for their den name. And I know a friend of mine who had to go through this, and what's actually really upsetting is that he only does this to chubby or plus size trans people, not skinny ones at all. Which has also come to the terms of us realizing that he is fatphobic. So, yet he has dated a plus size person.
Cisgender people might be wondering, what the hell this has to do with you? But the status and mental health of the transgender people actually hinges on your actions and decisions. Because, as mentioned before, cisgender people make up 99.9% of the population. This is important for any hateful assumptions to be abolished because transgender people can barely ever make decisions that will affect the law and are subject to the changing of laws depending on the population, the majority of which being cisgendered. No matter what you want to believe, at the end of the day, we are all human. So take some time to educate yourself and support the people around you who are part of the transgender demographic. And if you're a trans person listening to this, or anyone struggling in general, you can text HOME to 741-741 for a free crisis counselor. The National Suicide Hotline is 1-800-273-8255, or you can call the Trans Lifeline at 877-565-8860. This has been Onyx. I'm lukewarm, and now you are informed. Bloopers. During my research, these combinations can sometimes result in people who have both male or call the Trans Lifeline at 877-567. Fuck, that's not the number. Cisgender people may be wondering what the hell this has to do with you, but the status of mental health, God, and